my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to season 2 of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and man, it feels so damn good to be back, to be sitting in this chair, to be recording the show, and to know that, man, I'm going to be connecting with you guys once again via this platform. I appreciate everybody that's reached out over the nice little break that I've had over the last few weeks as I've been preparing for season 2, man. I'm so damn excited to be back. If you are watching the video version of the show, which you can catch on YouTube now via the Cultura Podcast Network YouTube page, or you check out the clips, you'll notice we got a brand new set, which I am proud to say that I built with my bare hands. These hands right here built the set behind you. We are in my brand new podcast studio, which is actually going to be open to the public. I'll put more details out there as it happens. But man, I'm really excited to kind of launch that business venture. But in the meantime, to not be sitting here doing construction every day, which is essentially what I've been doing during this break, I'm happy to kind of be back in the swing of everything. And with that said, you know, I was kind of going back and forth with myself about how I wanted to start off season 2, you know, and the blessing that is season 2. You know, the reality is not everybody gets the opportunity to have another season or to do it in the way that I'm doing it, you know, with a really amazing company behind me that's putting a lot of effort, amazing team behind me, the whole Cultura podcast team. I appreciate all of them so much. I mean, Giselle, Claudia, Jasmine, everybody else that's working on different things for me that I'm not even aware of. I appreciate you guys so much for all the hard work you're putting into, man, helping this show grow and get to more people. Now, back to what I was saying. I was debating how I wanted to kind of kick off this season, and I did this interview last week, even though we were off, just kind of in preparation of the season, and also because I really enjoyed the story that this person had and all the work that they were doing, and I'm so happy that I decided to do it. Now, the person I'm speaking of is Christopher Rivas, who is actually a Dominican American actor who people might know from the Fox show Call Me Cat. He also is the author of the book Brown Enough. He also hosts a podcast called Rubirosa, which is the story of the real life James Bond, who was actually a Dominican. And we'll get into all of that story, you know, and why it's so important for Chris and our culture in general, and a lot of the ideas of Hollywood sort of whitewashing and stuff we talked about last season. But for me, when it came to this first episode, I thought it was really incredible to, you know, showcase somebody else who is speaking to so many of the things that I've spoken about in season 1, and so many things that, you know, you guys have you know, told me that you've related to, right? And that you've shown me that other people feel the same way and exist out there, you know, who are searching for their authenticity within their culture. And Chris and his book Brown Enough hits the nail on the head. And this conversation was so powerful for me. And to hear, you know, the sort of reckoning and awakening that Chris had internally after sort of, you know, shunning his culture for so long. And I don't think shunning might be the right word, but sort of, you know, having to hide parts of himself for the sake of success, I think is a better way of phrasing it, you know. And I just loved Chris's story, and I thought it was so powerful, and there was no better way than to use this episode to showcase, you know, his story and how, man, it's so powerful, and one that I hope leaves, you know, a mark on a lot of you guys, which I think it will. And I thought it was the perfect episode to launch season 2 with. Now, I apologize for being long-winded. I'm just hyped to be here. But man, you know, no Ask a Gringo segment on today's show. I want to be able to play as much of the interview as possible, just time-wise. But we'll get to that for our Thursday Trends episode. So I'll make sure y'all get a chance to have your voice heard, and we'll still be having those Thursday Trends episodes as per usual. Now, with that said, man, let's just dive into my conversation with Chris, and we'll do it for our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. My guest today is an actor who you've seen on Fox's Call Me Cat. He is also the host of the Rubirosa podcast and the Brown Enough podcast, and also author of the book Brown Enough, a man who might be giving me a run for my money with multiple job titles here in the industry. Christopher Rivas, how you feeling, my bro?
I'm feeling good. Why do we got to do so much stuff?
Right, yeah, I know. Bro, there's probably some childhood wounds that we're both maybe compensating for to a degree.
Yeah.
That I think we might have to dive into at some point in our life, right?
We do a lot of things. We're making it. That's what that's making it. You know, I think that's what our work is about. Whatever that means, making it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it also speaks probably to just being passionate about what you do, right? And I think that it's as corny as it sounds, it's so stereotypical. It's like, you know, it's not work, right? Because you enjoy it. It still is hard work, but there's something about being so fired up about the work that you do that your ideas just keep flowing and everything just seems so exciting that you just feel like you have to jump onto that idea. You know, I don't know. For me, that's kind of how it is.
Many years ago, I lived in Serbia, and I was like training in theater out there. And this crazy, old, wonderful Russian master of biomechanics came in, and he said, "The jack of all trades is the master of none." And this messed with me for a long time because I felt like I liked trades. I had a lot of trades, you know, and I was like, "Oh, am I a master of nothing?" Like this was, I mean, this really challenged me for a long time. And I came to when I discovered for me personally this idea of storytelling, I felt like, oh, I can master and I am a master of storytelling because whether I'm writing a poem or I'm acting or a play or a book or a podcast, we're facilitating story, you know? So I felt like that's what gives me, at least that's what I tell my mind to allow me to make so many things at once.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense for me because I think I struggle with that same kind of thing, that same concept. You always hear people kind of say that idea, right? You're a master of none, and I've always struggled with that as well. And I think that was the universe just fed me that line from you essentially, right? They put us together in a way that I needed to hear that, which I think that's a really, really good kind of perspective to have. And I think you have so many of them. We were talking about this before we started recording. Just kind of the synchronicity, I think, of a lot of the work that we're each individually doing, you know. And I think I was telling you that when I began to kind of read about the book Brown Enough that you're working on, it really kind of spoke to me in so many ways. And I felt like I was also reading a bit about my own story, which I was really excited about. And I think for me, this podcast has been just such an incredible way for me to recognize that I'm not alone in those feelings that I've had, right? In the questioning of your authenticity, specifically in your own community for the sake of this conversation, you know? And it's great to kind of see other people out there, you know, creating it and doing the work and putting it out there for other people to feel at home. Because I know for me, you know, I've gotten so much amazing feedback from my audience that I didn't even know was out there, right? That they've been looking for something like this, that it's speaking to them, and it's something that they never knew how to kind of verbalized. They always felt alone in it, you know. And I'm sure you've gotten so much feedback from other people as well, just kind of being on this run that you're on with putting out the book and things like that people are feeling like, wow, you're speaking to me in a way that I feel like I've never been seen before. Yeah,
that's the mission of my work is to create spaces of belonging, spaces of being seen. And so that if you read the book, you know, you're like, oh, I feel seen. I mean, the dedication that opens the book, the first words that open the book are, I dedicate this to all the little brown kids. I see you. I hear you. We hear. You know, like, I dedicated this to these. I didn't feel seen as a child. It's easy to not feel that way now. I was at this insane Dominican party last night. You know, like playing dominoes, dancing, eating lechon. And I was like, this is a space of belonging. This is a space of being seen. And whether we know it or not, this is good for us. Like as a people, seeing a room full of 150 brown people enjoy is good for us. So that's what I want all my art to do, is that, you know, we feel seen.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I mean, so let's dive into some of the concepts that I think are really kind of at the core of the book and at the core of what you're talking about. And I think you talk about having a bit of a racial awakening, right? I think you talk about trying to navigate how to show up authentically as yourself, but also sort of having to work around these preconceived rules, right, of what it means to be a Latino, right, what it means to fit in, quote unquote, to your community, right. And I think it's also interesting. I think the further and further we get away from the generations that were born in their native land, right, or we're a product of, living here in the States for a long time and being a part of that culture. So inevitably we're going to adapt certain things from that, right? And I think for me, that has sort of, I think, created this question mark of like, am I Latin enough, right? Have I adapted too many things from my upbringing, from the areas that I grew up in, and things of that nature? So, I mean, I'd love for you to kind of begin to just dive into a bit of this journey that you talk about in the book, for kind of finding, what made sense to you and how you began to feel comfortable in your own skin and being able to find that sense of community, but still, being authentically you in the process.
Yeah, my whole life has been one of like, and maybe this is everyone's life, but for real, it has felt like my whole life was one of, who am I? Really, like what, how do I do this thing? I think bodies of culture, which I like far more than like bodies of color, bodies of because what they're trying to take from us is our culture. It's not our color. Right. And there is an inherent thing braided into us that when we are born in this, which is fair to say, a white world, that we have to work harder. We're coming from behind. And so that in order to hit the starting line, we gotta work harder. And I think as a child, I really had that, partly because I loved the television. Like I loved it. I loved it. And I wanted to be on it. I wanted to be an actor. I saw Broadway play. I wanted to be up there. And my pops was no stranger to telling me how hard I'd have to work. Fake it till you make it, pretend, put yourself there until it comes true. These lessons of assimilation, these lessons of, of you can do it, but you're gonna have to hustle and navigate and carry yourself with the confidence of like a mediocre white man. Like you can do all these things. And so that's sort of me as a child. My real racial awakening, as you say, which I think is true, I had two. The first one is I'm in college and I find out that James Bond is based on a Dominican man named Porfirio Rubirosa. My father's Dominican. I loved James Bond as a kid. I mean, literally running around my house in my underwear with every Nerf gun strapped to me, pretending I was James Bond. And my earth was shattered, and I wondered how would my life have been different if the character I loved most as a child looked like me, looked like my pops, looked like the people at those parties. Would I have tried so hard to put on a British accent, to sound like them, to look like them, to straighten my hair? And so this really hit me. I mean, it changed my life, and then this man has his own complications. Porfirio Rubirosa is like, he was married to all these white women and, wanted to disassociate from the DR and lived in Paris, but was a diplomat for the DR, twice the richest man in the world. Crazy life. So I did this deep dive on him. I ended up making this play. We took it around the country. The play got turned into the podcast Rubirosa, which is pretty epic. It's like a 10-part docuseries. Fast forward, and then I see Ta-Nehisi Coates, a brilliant man, writer, thinker, like modern day James Baldwin, speaks on race, writes on race. Sure. He's at a like something in LA, this intimate thing, and he's talking about black and white, and I raise my hand and I say, where does that put me, a Dominican, Colombian, brown kid from Queens? Like, where am I in the conversation? And he said, not in it. And I went home, this other sort of, I think when you're shattered, it's really an opportunity to like, opening is good. Shattering isn't bad. To be shattered is like, now I get to ask fatter questions. Right. And so I asked, what does it mean to not be in it? And what is the role of brownness within this world of black and white? And it wasn't so much Latino-ness, because I have my own struggles with like, how can you sum up 22 different countries and experiences and heritages and like fucking Latino or Latina or Latinx? Like, right. It's So it was brownness. I embraced this thing because I grew up with Pakistani friends, Indian friends. Like I grew up in Queens, the most diverse place in the world, possibly. So I went on this exploration of what does it mean to be brown and to be in it. In doing that, I blew up my life. I wrote this Modern Love article about, dating white women that went kind of crazy. I started growing back my curls. I looked at why I kept my hair short, why I listened to my manager when she told me to get a nose job, why I worked more when I got the nose job. I started seeing you couldn't go to a coffee shop or a park without seeing race and everything. A racial awakening is exhausting. Yeah, and
sure.
then it's really tiring. And then I started to find, what does it mean to be enough, and who do I want to be enough for them or for myself? And so that's sort of the journey of this book. And then I wrote it all down.
You're touching on man, so many fucking things I want to get into, but I think I want to start because this really resonated. You're talking about that your dad told you, well, you're going to have to work harder and have this level of confidence, right? Because the doors are essentially not going to open very easily for someone like you, right? And I think it's interesting, and then what you just touched on as well, kind of having this idea of like you maybe didn't see race and now your eyes have been open to it to a degree, right? I think for me, my parents are Puerto Ricans who grew up in the Bronx, right? But, for me, I spent my teenage years in the suburbs of New Jersey, right? And I think for them, the trauma that they went through of being poor people, of seeing firsthand, my mom is a public school teacher in the Bronx, or was before she retired, seeing firsthand the way those kids were treated, those kids of color, and the way that the world judged them. It was almost like they tried to teach me almost to be as different from that as humanly possible, right? And I think in a bit of them trying to protect me, I lost a bit of my own culture and identity, right? And my dad is still the proudest Puerto Rican you may ever meet in your life, but it was like this weird complexity, right? Because it was like we're taught almost to be really proud behind closed doors, right? But when it comes to leaving the house, make sure you're dressing a certain way, right? Like I couldn't get a skin fade, right, when I wanted to, because that was viewed as something like the ghetto kids in the Bronx had, right? Things like that. And I think, someone like me with my complexion who can pass for almost probably any race out there, right? I was able to somewhat assimilate into whiteness, right? And even though I kind of summed it up like they let me in the room, but you never had a seat at the table, right? But for some people that's good enough because that's better than where we come from, right? At least you're in the room, at least you're a part of the conversation to a degree. And it wasn't until I got older, and especially my time with the Breakfast Club, and I began to really be a part of a lot of these conversations and seeing the passion that these guys had specifically talking to the Black community, and then looking at my own community and seeing the issues and wondering who's the voice for us, right? And recognizing some of the faults of my upbringing and this assimilation. I had a similar racial awakening, and you're right. It's like, once you see it, you can't go back, right? Like there's no putting, Pandora back in the box at that point, right? And I know for me, and I'm curious for you, there were a lot of people who were part of my life prior to this that had a hard time adjusting to this new mindset that I had, right? This new way that I viewed the world, specifically talking about like white friends that I grew up with, right? Who to them, just because we grew up in the same neighborhood, they think I'm at the same level of privilege as them, right? Not recognizing the difference in race, right? Not recognizing the just family connections because they've been in the suburbs for generation upon generation, right? So I'm curious for you, kind of having this awakening, talk about kind of maybe the life that you left behind or the adjustment to this previous life that you had as well.
Yeah, the Pandora's box is a good metaphor, right? I often say like ignorance is bliss until you've tasted bliss. Then the rest is just ignorance.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great quote.
It's hard to go back, and I think that's the only aggressive word, but sin, like the only. But also it's okay, right? Like we've all seen The Matrix. Yeah. It's hard to unplug. Right. It's aggressive. It's painful. It's not as pretty at first. It takes a minute to get adjusted. And that might not be for everybody, and that might not be everybody's journey. I think like you said, if you said you were invited into the room, but like didn't have the voice, but you were in the room, and that's enough for some people.
Sure.
So I try not to like condemn or put anyone down for being like, if you got to play the game, play the game. It's a game.
Right.
And and we have to survive and win in whatever way that feeds us. But if you are ready to do the unplugging, to call out the injustice, to disrupt spaces, to possibly lose friends, or have tough conversations, hell, you might make great friends. You might make better friends because you had the conversations you hadn't had yet. Yeah. You know, it's also a beautiful journey. It's hard, you know, but I try not to put anyone down who's like not ready to go to those places.
Sure.
I personally believe those places are where we need to be more. I'm a big believer in disruption. You know, in order for something to be born, it must destroy a world to create another. Like, and so that is my goal as an artist and as a person, is also like, can I create disruptive art? Can it be entertaining? Because like sugar helps the medicine go down, as Mary Poppins says, you know. So like, let's entertain them, but let's also create spaces where, you know, people are a little shook, and hopefully shooken with their neighbor, that they can talk about it.
Right.
And that's where I think we are as a society actually right now, is this disruptive play where some people are hanging on to the old so intensely that it becomes aggression. It becomes literal violence, like literal uprisings, because they're hanging on because they don't want the change, you know. And then you have the ones who are pushing for it. And so we're in this disruptive place. I don't know how long, but I do think it's a good place to be. Yeah.
I mean, I think I was actually just talking about this with my girlfriend over the weekend, but I think you look at any substantial change that has happened over the course of history. I mean, there was kind of this tug and pull between old world and new world happening, right? I mean, the Civil War is essentially a very bloody analogy for that, right? There were people who literally were fighting against change so hard that they thought that they should start their own country and go to war with one another, right? You know, so what's happening right now, I think life and history are very cyclical, right? We've seen it to some degree. You can kind of see the cards on the table and refer to something that happened in history, right? And I think we're kind of in that time period right now. But I think, you know, I think for a lot of people, and some people are getting it and others aren't, but they don't realize the poison of colonialism is so deeply ingrained in the way that all of us think and see the world, right? And it's been happening for centuries before any of us were even an idea, right? But I like how you mentioned, I'd love for you to expound upon that a bit when you're talking about, you know, dating white women, right? And that conversation, because it leads to the conversation of like how we don't even realize white beauty standards have been made to be superior because of this colonial mindset, right? And I know, again, for me growing up, you know, like it was almost like, because I felt like the women of color didn't see me as one of their own, it was like I shunned them as not being attractive to me. It was like something that I used to protect myself, right? And then obviously on top of what you saw on TV, right? What you saw in the magazines, who are these sex symbols, you know, for teenage kids growing up, right? It's all white women on television. They are the prized, you know, I hate to use the word possession, but, you know, in this sort of idea, in this sort of hypersexualized culture we could talk about of back in the day. But, you know, that's sort of the mindset that we grew up as kids. So I'd love for you to kind of expound upon that, because I think so many people don't even realize just like the whitewashing essentially that happens in almost every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, poisoned, you know, I use the term like braided into us, colonialism, capitalism. It's like tight knots into us. Yeah. This is why I care less about answers and more about asking like fat questions, you know. And Rilke says like you might live yourself into an answer, but you have to ask the question, like really crazy questions. And so one question I asked myself is, why do I date so many white women? And I really started to do the work. You know, I looked at this Rubirosa man, and I asked, why does he date so many white women? You know, like why? Even then, and people are doing it now. I looked at movies, and I said, why are these brown guys always being saved by this white woman? You know, like why is Aziz attracted to her but not her? You know, and I'm looking at everything. and it's part of that awakening. You know, you're just like, I gotta examine it all.
Right.
And it's everywhere. It's in movies. It's in image. It's like you said, beauty standards, right? Every magazine is a toned, you know, white woman. Like,
right.
And just because you put one person on the cover, it doesn't erase, you know, it's like if you sat for 23 hours in a day and you stretched for 60 seconds, no offense, it ain't going to do nothing. Like, you're still going to have tight hamstrings.
Yeah.
You know, so all this, that's one of my things about our whole diversity talk is like, it's going to take a while till the scales are balanced, because talk is not action. Mm-hmm. And then when we do one action and it gets all the press in the world, like, you know, SNL hired the first Dominican. It's like, we never say SNL hired another white person.
Right.
Like,
right.
Until we get to that place, you know, where it's a little more normalized, which is good though. Yeah. Hire the Dominicans. I'm not mad at it. I'm just like,
right. But we don't have to like sit here and over celebrate. Like that's something, you know, we should be patting SNL on the back for, because they've been finally diversified.
Yeah. And so I asked myself, why do I date so many white women? And I went on this real deep journey and looked at media and culture and beauty standards, and the world's obsession with whiteness. You know, that's also tied into it. It's not even women related. It's old Japanese paintings where the main characters are porcelain white. It's skin whitening cream that we can go get at a Walgreens right now off the shelf.
Sure.
That's happening in Ghana. In Korea, you can get your skin whitened on the subway. They actually just changed that in Korea. Like, you're not allowed to promote skin whitening in public areas. This is like a new law.
Wow. Yeah.
Because you used to like be, you know, my sister lived in Korea, and so like literally you're on the subway and it's like, you know, hop off here, like lighten your skin. You know, this world is obsessed with whiteness. And even if we are not so-called, like, even if like I'm not obsessed with whiteness, that's still inside you.
Right.
It was a part of your
parents.
That's
the hardest thing, because you're almost judging yourself to a degree. You're like, fuck, am I racist because I like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's the almost internal struggle. And I think that's where a lot of people stop, because it's hard to like really hold yourself accountable, right? Because it's like, it's easy to yell at somebody else to be like, you're fucking racist for doing this, that, and the third. But then when I have to sit down and talk to myself and be like, wait, like I've been doing some shit that like doesn't align also with the values that I kind of want to be putting out there, right? That's the tough conversation that, you know, to have, and then let alone to admit it freely in the way that we're speaking about, or the way that you've wrote about it previously.
To admit it in the New York Times, I got death threats. Right. You know, I got compared to Jim Crow, some like white supremacist with 1 million views on YouTube, like 1 million subscribers, because anyone can have subscribers. Like, put it as like the new, I'm the face of woke racism. Like, which is so, it was funny. It was hard. It was like, what? Did you even read it? You know, how asking the question was me damning a people or a nation.
Right.
When I was just asking the question, like, the question is, why do I do this thing? It's not, I'm not going to do this thing.
Right.
It's not, you shouldn't do this thing. It's not telling everyone, go break up with your white partner. It's just know why you do anything. Why are you on that diet? Ask yourself, really, is it for you or is it someone else? You know, why are you addicted to this thing? Why do you love that person who makes you feel like shit? Really ask the question.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and even it's like on a simple level, why does my eye automatically go there, right? Like, what is the subconscious thing that my eye is noticing that before anything else, right? Noticing that woman before maybe the table full of, you know, beautiful women of color next to it, right? And I think, there's nothing wrong with asking that question, right? And I think that to your point, there are so many people who are just offended by any question of anything, right? They want to point out that, you know, you having this conversation is quote unquote racist, right? And I think it's because I think as human beings, our ego tends to get in the way, right? Like, it's really hard to let go of that ego and to recognize that maybe a lot of the things that we were taught that we consider to be like these cornerstones of our life were really based on nothing, right? Like I think that's sort of a lot of the conversation you're seeing with a lot of these really hardcore far right people, right, who are like trying to ban certain books and all this other stuff, right, and who are literally fighting against real history being taught in schools, right? It's because if they don't have that, then it's like, man, it feels like everything they were taught was a lie, right? The things that their father taught them growing up, right, and told them to stand upon, like, actually wasn't based on anything real, right? And I think for a lot of people, it then becomes this identity crisis that if you take away this one thing that they believe, then who the fuck are they at that point, right?
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, like, change is so scary that they literally would do anything to fight against it, right? And then, you know, but then critique anybody who's actually going down that path of trying to find the answer to, you know, who am I really, right? In your case.
I was talking to a pastor and he called it the last gasp. This was which I love so much. Like, apparently there's something, I'm not super versed in the Bible, but there's this moment in the Bible, you know, the last gasp, where a person is hanging on, you know, for their identity. It's not even their breath. And he said what's happening now in America, you know, specifically around whiteness and a certain old tribe of people, of ideals, is the last gasp. Like this truly, I will do anything to maintain my identity, which is my life in essence.
Yeah.
You know, to tie it to the book, it's like, I believed one thing about my identity. I needed to shed and uncover and ask these questions, like, what is my identity? And we all want that. We're all in search of that. No matter, we're doing it all the time, you know, like when you go to the club, when you do this, when you join CrossFit, like you're trying to figure out what is my identity.
Yeah. Right. And it's, man, but it's, I want to put this out. I mean, it's not easy, right? I think that is kind of, you know, it's people don't understand it or don't want to understand it because it isn't a lot of really hard work, right? And it's hard to critique yourself in that way and sort of really be ultra critical and, like, man, almost not be proud of some of the things that you thought, right? But there's still a part of you and there's still something you have to work through, you know? And I think, man, we all have to kind of be able to I think to get to this real place of healing, it's also letting go of the shame that we put upon ourselves for certain things, right? Because we're all kind of just fighting in defense of ourselves and rationalizing why this thought isn't as bad as we think it is, kind of, right? Or, you know, because then we feel like it brings something terrible up about us, right? That we're not a good person, we're not these things, right? And I think that's sort of like when you talk about the idea of I'm not even gonna go as far as the white supremacists. Some of them might be kind of a lost cause, but those people who maybe fall in the middle, right? Who are like people who voted for Donald Trump but are like angry if somebody calls them a racist, right? So they're having like this internal struggle, you know, of like, you know, well, you're actually supporting racism whether you want to believe it or not, but they can't accept that because then they have this shame about feeling racist, right? So it's like, you know, to combat that, they're just pushing harder against it. And it's this really weird internal struggle. And you have to be able to be unafraid to look at yourself, admit wrong, and then kind of rebuild from there, which I think is a lot of what you're saying.
There's this insane New York Times article, and I might be butchering it, but I believe it's called White Debt. Because in Germany, debt and guilt are the same word. Like to have debt, like financial debt, is to have guilt. Which I love. And so this writer goes on this journey of explaining white debt, white guilt. You know, it's like they bought a house they couldn't afford. You know, America, this dream, and now the foundation of the house is starting to crumble. You know, and like they haven't paid off the house yet.
Right.
You know, there's this idea of debt and guilt. You know, and whiteness in this society feeling like they have to pay back something, but also feeling guilty. That's a lot of feelings. Like, it's hard for everybody. It's hard. Yeah. It's a crazy time.
No, I mean, it is. And I think...
we as bodies of culture have it too, right? Because we feel like, then, do I have to work extra hard to lift up my whole people?
Right. You know, now am I like, do I have to do this for everyone? Like, can I just do it for myself? Like, well, you know, do I have to speak up? Or when do I speak up? It's everybody's, you know, we have so much, the calculations we're doing. We're incredible mathematicians, and every second we're balancing the scales. Is it worth it? Should I do it? Will it gain me something? Will I lose something? You know? Right. Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, even, you know, the idea, then it becomes a performance almost, because it's like, well, now I want to present myself in a way that changes the way this person judges people of color, let's say, right? I think that was part of what I was getting at with my parents and our upbringing, right? We were trying to change the perception maybe people had of a Latin family moving into a white neighborhood, right? So like we were trying to present in a different way, you know? So it's like this internal struggle. And to your point, that is like this guilt, this debt that you feel like you have to pay, you know? And then even now it's like every time something bad happens in our community or there's some sort of atrocity, it's like people feel this pressure. I have to speak out on social media. I have to repost it. I have to tell people why this is bad, right? We're all like, I love that idea of this debt. We're all feeling like, oh my God, I have to pay this off. I have to pay this off type of thing, right? And it's a bit exhausting. I think that's something that's a bit lost as well, where people are, you know, want to write off us as overly woke and this, that, and the third, but they don't realize that this is also hard work, right? We're not just doing this to get attention because we want to be having constant conversations and arguments with people for no reason at all that we don't really know, right? Like it's also stuff that I think weighs upon us after a while as well, you know, where you begin to get burnt out just being somebody who's advocating for this, even though you know it's right, you know, and that's like a weird balance in itself, I think.
That's where, do you know the NAP ministry?
No.
So they're this organization who, you know, radical rest, that like rest is resistance. And that since bodies of culture subconsciously believe they have to work harder, you know, or as James Baldwin says, we're born running on a treadmill. Everybody else is walking. That if another thing we can do that is like radical resistance is to unplug from whiteness, to actually do nothing, to like sit back and be like, I'm not to do nothing as far as action, but to be like, I'm not going to play your game. I'm not going to participate in it. I'm not going to participate in your ideals. I'm not going to buy the things you tell me to buy to make me better about myself. Like, I'm not going to sell I'm just going to rest. Like, so that I'm less exhausted.
Right.
Because you want me exhausted. Because exhaustion doesn't allow people to thrive. It doesn't.
Right.
It burns people out. Like, exhaustion is hard. And can we as bodies of culture really claim our power from this exhausted state, or do we have to be well rested? You know, I think that's part of enoughness. Authenticity is like, I want someone who is themselves, but also like doesn't think they have to go 1,000,000 miles an hour just to be themselves.
That's really powerful, because I think that when you have that awakening, you kind of also have like this supercharge in your back where you feel like you have to make up for all the years that you've been sort of asleep at the wheel almost, right? And I think that's a really, I think you have to tell people like, wait, it's okay to take that step back, right? It's okay to just like enjoy the present moment, right? To be around your people and not feel like you're having to go out into another space and educate people, but to be in a place where you don't have to, like, it's all unspoken, right? We know we're there. There's a brotherhood that happens, a sisterhood, whatever, you know.
That's a part of dating too, right? If you're thinking about race and dating, is like, I interviewed a lot of friends when I was having these questions. Like, I interviewed mad friends who, like, you know, black people married to black women, like Pakistanis dating a South Asian. Like, I interviewed a lot of people, and a universal thing that came up was sometimes it's nice to not have to talk about it because they get it.
Yes.
I don't got to explain. I don't got to teach. I can just be like, you know, fuck, damn, together. And that's it. And that's enough. And they get it, and they hold space. And I'm not saying that that's the better way. I'm just saying it's an option. It's part of the question asking. Like, but that idea of space where we don't have to do more, right? Can we put ourselves in more spaces where we don't have to do more or be more? Yeah. We are already enough. Hence the title of the book, sort of Brown Enough. Like, you are enough as you are. Yeah.
That's incredibly powerful. I think that's a great observation from your work there. I mean, I think the other thing I want to touch on specifically to what you were just talking about as we kind of open things up was the idea of not being a part of the conversation as a brown person, right? And I think that unfortunately what happens a lot, there is sort of this scarcity mindset that happens, right? Where it's like, if I talk about somebody else's issues, it then takes away the attention from my issues and the ability for my issues to be repaired, right? It's like there's just not enough to go around. So like I have to focus on myself and my own issues, and I can't open space for yours, right? And I think that tends to unfortunately kind of happen when we talk about some of these issues between people of color and the things that happen in this country, be it police brutality and all of these kinds of things, you know, because you speak to people, and in certain cities, you know, the rates of Latinos, you know, being, you know, abused by the police is higher than that of Black people, right? And it's not a competition. It's just to say that we're experiencing very similar things, and we're also experiencing our own traumas in different ways as well. So, I mean, I love to kind of hear the ideas that begun to awaken you. I'm sorry. When somebody said to you, you're not a part of this conversation. You know what I mean? Like, I think some might go to resentment in that moment. You know what I mean? And others may go into like the deep dive of the research of the things that are going on in their community. I'm curious kind of where the pendulum sort of swung for you, and what was that journey for you?
Yeah, I think first I want to speak to scarcity mindset. You know, we use the SNL example. Like someone watches that and it's like, oh, great, there's a Dominican, but where's the Guatemalans? You know, or like, you know, oh, awesome, cool, but like, where's the Vietnamese?
Right.
And I think that's real. I think that's real. I think it's like, we got to lift up ours, you know, and what about me?
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be that way. You know, James Baldwin said, as soon as we put one person in a cage, we put everybody in the cage. And I believe that. We ain't free until everybody's free.
Right.
That's whiteness included. White people are in the cage, y'all. Like they're in the nasty water we all swimming in. The water is toxic, and everybody's a fish in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, because, and I just to interject real quick, because if you look at history, at one point, certain white people were treated as lesser than, right? And it wasn't until it became in favor of these other powered white people that they began inviting, let's say, like the Irish as a part of the conversation, or they invited Jewish people to be a part of the white conversation, right? But at one point, they were viewed as like, you know, the people that we didn't want to touch, we didn't want to talk to, right? But as the, you know, Black and brown people became more and more in numbers and things like that, right? So as we began to retain more power, then it became more of a benefit for certain white people, the elite white people, to invite others as a part of that conversation. So to your point, it's kind of like, I can't remember who said this, but it's like, you know, you sit there and you're watching as your neighbors, you know, they're banging on their doors and they're ripping people out of their houses, right? But you don't say anything. You don't tell anybody. You don't call the police or anything like that. And what's eventually going to happen is they're going to come and bang on your door at one point and rip you out of that house, right? So hypothetically, if we're talking about all the Black people are then locked up in jail, they're going to come for somebody else next, and then somebody else next. And then, like you said, the white people as well, the lower class, quote unquote, white people who are lower on that ring of the totem pole are going to get next, right? So it's always this, there's always going to be somebody else that's going to be viewed as lesser than, and then they're going to have to deal with the repercussions of that. And that's why it's important for us to speak out, even if it's not directly affecting us, right?
Not only speak out, but celebrate. Celebrate other people's wins.
Yeah.
Celebrate that movie that's not about your culture and not starring you, but like it's still a win. Celebrate that TV show. Celebrate that book. Like we have to support non-white art and media. We have to, because it's a win for everybody. It really is. Yeah. And it might not feel that way because it's not about me. You know, like we're never, what is it? My meditation teacher says we're never more selfish than when something isn't going our way. You know, and how many times are things not going our way? You know, so really, inherently, we're just selfish all the time. Right. Another thing to this sort of winning, or the reason I chose the word brown, Howard Gardner in A People's History of America says, the greatest trick whiteness pulled was convincing someone that it was better to be poor and white than poor and black. We all know about Dubois and the line. There's a line between black and white. This world has always been divided into yin and yang, this and that, his, him, right? Brown isn't so much about skin color. Sure, there's that. I do think there's more brownness in the world than there is everything else. There's more muddiness. There's more middle space. There is more of that stuff. Brownness is really also an idea of like, how do we live in the middle? How do we live in a less binary way? How do we embrace that middle space? And I mean this in everything. I mean it in love. I mean it in finance. I mean it in career. I mean it in art. Like, how do you live in that middle space? And I believe that is where authenticity and enoughness really lie, is embracing that middle space where it says you don't have to be this or that, which is what the world has been trying to sell to you forever.
Right.
Because you'll never really be enough. You know, when you're complete, when you're dead. Like, you'll be complete. You would have taken all the workshops you could have taken, like, because it never ends.
Right.
So unless you embrace this middle fluid space right now, you will not, I don't think we'll ever feel enough.
Right.
And so that's why I chose brown. Brownness was also really an embodiment of just what it means to embrace the middle, what it means to embrace non-binary thinking, to be present with the fluidness of right here, right now. However good or however shitty it is, whoever's winning, whoever's not winning, starting from this point right here.
Right. I think that's beautifully said. It's very Zen, like, and sort of Buddhist philosophy, the idea of, we are life, right? We are not the self. We are just life. We are just the present moment. We are whatever is happening currently around us, right? And being able to view life through that lens and take away some of the a selfishness we're talking about as well, where you're just trying to do things for yourself and force things to happen for the idea that you have in your head, right? And then you're pushing against the natural order of just life itself, right? And the beauty that it kind of goes in and out of, good or bad, right? The way that things kind of develop, which I think is really, really beautiful. And I think, specifically though, when we talk about the idea of, being an advocate and being a voice for you in that moment, did you sort of feel like I need to kind of fill this void that I'm not seeing, right? Because I think on television, and rightfully so, there's an endless amount of incredible activists from the Black community, right? Historically incredible activists who have had just incredible voices and made such substantial change, but sadly, be it because of the whitewashing of media or Hollywood, our voices are not held up in a similar fashion, and sadly, it almost seems like they don't exist to a degree. Was that kind of a part of this journey for you and a part of this sort of fire that was lit inside of you?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to make it in Hollywood, like I did. I wanted to. I don't know that I have, like, I don't know what that is, until
right,
I'm
whatever
like
Leonardo
DiCaprio, like,
right.
But I wanted to make it as a kid. Like, I loved acting, and I loved the stage, more than anything. And I did that for a long time, but I did feel like I could do this Hollywood thing. I don't know why I felt that, but I did. And I let that guide me. Sometimes I regretted letting it guide me, but, and so there was this sort of chip on my shoulder. I think sometimes there still is. That's something I'd love to surrender, like a chip to prove. I'm always like, to prove someone wrong. Who? Like,
right.
Who?
Yeah.
It's really myself and maybe a whole industry, which is like, that's so exhausting to fight an entire system. But yeah, I wanted to make it in this game of Hollywood, and I did, and there's a lot more than talent that is needed. Yeah, that's real. To any young actors listening, like, it is a journey that involves a lot more than just the simple talent. Yeah, you have to learn how to sustain emotionally, financially, physically. Part of my journey included having this white manager who was very honest with me. I don't know if it's good or bad. I'll just say honest. Like, I'm not putting a caveat on it. And the first thing was I left college with this beautiful, curly Dominican afro. And she said, "You haven't earned that hair yet." Like, they're not looking for it, and you haven't earned it. You haven't built a name for yourself. Wow. You need to cut it off. And I get chills, like, even right now telling this story, because I remember going home crying, and I listened to her. Like, I let her guide my life. I let her guide my worth, my value. And I cut my hair. I booked some stuff, which is also like, you're just like, oh, fuck, that's weird. And then when I was booking more, she said, I think you should get a nose job. And she sat me down. She made me watch footage of myself. And she said, I'm not telling, I can't tell you to do anything. I think you should. I went home, I chatted with my family. They didn't say no. They didn't say yes. They were like, if it's something you want to do, like, and I did it. And I worked a bunch after. And I was like, damn, am I working because, again, ask questions, not answers. Like, am I working because I look more like them? I'm more acceptable. I'm more Eurocentric, or am I just more confident? I don't know. Like, both could be right. And so, and yet, as I keep going, when I did Call Me Kat, like, that was my first series regular. And that you get the messages. You look like my son. My son likes watching you. He's got curly hair. He's Dominican. He's, it's so nice to see, a brown person up there. Like, those messages mean a lot. They mean a lot. Here's my overall goal in Hollywood, because representation is nice. Sure. #representation matters. But things don't really change until the people signing those checks look and sound like us. It is nice to receive fat checks, y'all. Give me fat checks. I will take them. But it is nicer to be able to sign them, to create the opportunities, to, be ahead of the projects. Like, actors are first ones on, last one's on, first one's off.
Right.
But the money doesn't look like us. It doesn't feel like us. It doesn't sound like us. It often doesn't care about us. And so that is now one of my goals, or one of my intentions. I want to be able to one signing checks for people who look and sound like us. That's how the industry changes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think that's often lost in the conversation. And it's obviously sexier to be the person in front of the camera, right? The person at the award shows, the person getting interviewed, and all of the above. But the real power lies behind the scenes, like you said, the person signing the check at the end of the day. And I think that's an important message for people to hear. That they don't have to just be striving for being an actor, actress, whatever it is. That there's other opportunities that they could be seeing themselves in, and actually that they're in fact needed in, right? And I think that's really powerful. And I want to talk a bit about the idea of, like, the whitewashing of Hollywood, right? Because there's been a lot of different conversations happening. You had HBO Max just kind of pulling the plug on Batgirl, and canceling a number of Latin based shows. There was James Franco getting cast as Fidel Castro.
Oh God.
So which I do want to get your take on that. And obviously something like John Leguizamo has been really outspoken about this as of late with his own experiences. I know he wrote a blurb for your book, and he talked about people changing their name. I believe Oscar Isaac was a name that was mentioned, right? And things like that. And I think it's really powerful here. You went as far as to change your physical appearance in a way of surgery, right? And I guess, that balance, man, of how do you balance wanting to have success and living your dreams, but also not losing yourself in the process, right? And I think obviously with time and with more success, it gets easier. But I think anybody younger, kind of starting out in their career, and anybody even like who's just working their ass off completely, to make a name for themselves, but like, how do you not give up too much of yourself in the process almost? I feel that's a really difficult thing to find that perfect balance.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a formula. I mean, part of me, my original thought when you asked was like, you might lose yourself. You might. And then you will hopefully meet that person you lost and decide if you want to come back or not. Like I'll do my best to describe it because I know it's audio, but I often see the world as like one hand is the person we want to become. The other hand is the person we are. The space in the middle is all the work we have to do in order to meet. And so you might lose yourself because this industry, and it's not just Hollywood. I think it's like any industry that tries to tell you what you're worth, you know, where you have to audition or sell yourself or like,
right.
I mean, social media, any kid is dealing with it now.
Sure.
The amount of likes, it's like someone else is telling you what you're worth. The amount of followers, like this world is constantly trying to put value on you, but only you can hold your own value. Right. Only we can do that. Right. So easy to say, easy ass sentence, easy. So hard to do.
Right.
Because everyone and their mother is trying to tell you what you are worth. Or what you should do to be worth more. But only we can determine our own worth. And that is a tremendous amount of work. And you might lose yourself in the process. Hell, you probably will lose yourself in the process. But if you are aware and you are conscious and you are asking big questions of yourself, and on those days where you feel lost, alone, lonely, confused, sit with that. Don't run from it. Because that's really showing you how you lost yourself, you know, where you went left and you could have gone right, where you went right and you could have gone left. So to any young actors entering this field, you know, do your best to stay aware, whatever that means to you, conscious, aware, like do your best. And if you got to play the game and you have to pivot or code switch or shut your mouth for a second or listen, or when the director says, stop with the ethnic hands, or someone tells you to cut your hair, just think for a sec. Why am I doing it? If you got to do it, that's okay too. Just ask why. And do I want to? And can I live with it? It's like a tattoo.
Yeah.
You're going to have it forever. Can I live with it? Yeah. And so I don't know that there is a formula other than awareness. Super easy to say, super hard to practice. We have to figure out our set of values early on in this life. And that can change. I can say all this now and wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to become I'm going to start an OnlyFans. Like, you know, like,
right.
I could do that.
Yeah.
That's the human condition. We're allowed to change our minds.
Right.
But if we have a strong value system, we'll know what we can stand for and what we don't stand for.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. Do you regret the going as far as getting the nose job at that point in your life?
I don't regret it because I can't go back. Like, you know, and it gave me the insight to ask these questions of myself. I didn't have that self-worth in me then to say no. I would have done anything to be seen. My whole life was a journey of trying to see me. I want to be seen. It wasn't even about being famous. I just want to be seen. I want to be recognized. Right. Am I enough to be in this space? Am I enough to play ball with y'all? Like, and had I not done that, I wouldn't have had the moments I had after, which allow me to know, like, you know, if all this goes away, like, I'm still here. I'm still me. I still got people around me I love.
Right.
And that's,
Yeah, I think it's a part of your journey, right? And I think that's a beautiful way to look at anything, good or bad, right? Understanding it as a necessary part to kind of deliver the person that's sitting there in this moment right now, which I think is a really beautiful way to look at it. We're kind of getting to the end of things, but I do quickly want to get your take as an actor. We talk about this idea, James Franco playing Castro, right? And I think it's a part of a bigger conversation of where do you draw the line, right? It's acting, right?
That's where you draw the line.
Right.
That's the line.
Okay, so why is that the line, right? Because you'll have people saying, well, like, okay, you know, obviously the dumb argument would be something like, oh, well, Tom Hanks played a man who had AIDS, right? Tom Hanks didn't have AIDS, but it was a great role type of thing, right? So why is this different for anybody who's sort of not there yet?
So the director made the most obscene statement that like they did his genealogy and Fidel wasn't actually Spanish, but he was like words I don't even know, like
come on,
and that James actually has that in him. And I was like, the absurdity.
The caucasity.
That's the word. That's really? Yeah. Also that they did like a bone structure thing, and in Hollywood he had the closest bone structure. I was like, bullshit. Also, you ain't got a cast here.
Right.
Go to Cuba. Go to Latin America. Find you people who look like that. Hell, Dramos, you look more like Fidel than like you do. If we grow your beer out more, like
right,
for real.
Yeah.
Like for real.
Yeah.
So the audacity, the caucasity, the ridiculousness.
Yeah.
To fight the last gasp, like that they prepared a statement in order to approve it. And then he also said, what about, Ana de Armas playing Marilyn Monroe? And at that point, I'm like, y'all, we get to play whoever we want in a way. I'm like, we just do. There's also a part of me that's like, you know what? We get our just desserts. And also, that's another conversation about sort of whiteness and,
Sure.
And being white passing and light skinned and beauty standards. Here's a Latin woman that, is paler than many white women I know who live in sunny places. And in order to stay that pale, you kind of have to do some work. You have to stay out of certain places. Like, so that's a whole other conversation.
Sure.
It's just insanity. It's insanity that James accepted the role. I'm like, that's wild. The director's statement is insanity. The HBO stuff you mentioned is insanity. Not even giving a show an opportunity that you paid money for that was finished. It was finished. Right. It was paid for.
And
it was
money
shot.
They spent, bro. For the money they spent on it, they are literally okay with just fucking literally burning 100, whatever it was, whatever the buzz was. Like that's insane.
And it's why I tell you, until the people signing the checks, who don't give a fuck about $100 million, $200 million, right. It's a joke to them. Until those people change. Because they have no understanding, they have no empathy for what canceling a show like that does for thousands of little girls.
Yes.
Who were so excited because they were going to see themselves as superheroes. They have no empathy. They don't care. They don't think about it. It's not in their bottom line. It's not in their spreadsheets. It's not in their Teslas. It's not in their meetings. What they did, how that hurts thousands and thousands of little girls who are so excited to see themselves. And that's why it's absurd. You cancel a show like Gordita Chronicles, has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And you say, this doesn't fit our value system anymore. Exactly. What's your value system, HBO?
Right.
Because it's not making people feel good about seeing themselves finally. We know it's not that. So the Hollywood, it's obscene.
I think you said it far better than I could. And man, it's fucking scary. And I think you put it the right way. It's moral of the story, until we become the people signing, the checks, that's when things are actually going to change. And I think that's what we have to start kind of striving for and working towards. Now, last thing I wanna ask you, and because you're big on asking questions, which I love. I think that is the way to maybe have a conversation with someone you don't agree with, right? Rather than telling them something, we ask a question. It leaves people open. Obviously, there's a lot of division in this country right now. There's a culture war kind of happening. What are the types of questions or conversations that you wish people were having more of?
Types of conversations are honest and uncomfortable ones. Like, and I don't just mean this race related. I don't mean it politics, I I think I really mean, what do you want from this life? Like, what are you actually in search of? I think we want feelings more than we want things, but then we tell ourselves the things will give us the feelings. But we want the feelings. We want to feel seen. We want to feel accepted. We want to feel loved. Like, you know, we want to show up into a space and be like, am I okay here? You know, like, am I good? I'm comfortable. We want peace. And then ask yourself, are the things you're doing in your life rooted to those things you want to feel? And are they sustainable? And then with other people in your life and other situations, are you supporting systems that don't allow other people to feel the things you want to feel or you get to feel? And are you willing to call it out? Like, it's the mathematics. And you know, I said we do survival mathematics all the time. We meet someone and we say, am I better than this person? Am I worse than this person? Am I smarter than this person? Like, will this person be able to give me something? Can I get something from this person? Can we serve each other? Do I like we're doing these survival mathematics all the time. Can we do that on a level that's less one-to-one and more sort of society-based, culturally based, block-based, neighborhood-based? Because everyone and their mother is doing their best to try and be okay. That's the basics of life. Everybody's doing their best to try and be okay. So if everyone's doing their best, you know, can we have compassion and ask questions and conversations that support everybody just trying to fucking, you know, nobody wants to suffer and everyone wants to be happy.
Right.
That's it. Like, it's I think I said 37 questions, but that's the mathematics I'm looking for. I'm looking for us to put ourselves in more spaces of challenge and disruption and discomfort in order to find what is it we're really looking for, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a lot.
No, I think it's, but I think that's beautifully said. And I think, you know, we could go on for another hour breaking down how, you know, people like who join these like Trump clans that all fits to them, right? Too. They're looking for a space where they feel welcomed and they're seen and blah, blah, blah. Right. So I think being able to see that empathy in a human being and understanding people are doing their best and allowing that to be the first layer that you see of somebody, then proceed from there. I think is really good kind of piece of advice.
Wait, before we bounce, what's on your altar?
Yeah. So we got Hector Lavoe over here.
Nice.
We've got Wu-Tang with the Puerto Rican flag thrown in there.
Great.
We got a Chicago Bulls basketball telephone from the 90s signed by Dennis Rodman.
Wow.
Who to me is my authenticity hero. And he's amazing.
You saw the doc, right? Obviously.
Oh yeah, amazing. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he's like, I gotta go to Vegas.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I got to go to Vegas.
Right. You want to talk about a guy who is unapologetically himself, and
he's so good that the team is like, he's got to go to Vegas.
Yeah. I got no choice here. My hands are tied. He has to go to Vegas. But yeah, then I got the Bad Brains skateboard deck, which they were a black hardcore punk band from the 80s, which was really kind of revolutionary for me as a kid who grew up into like really aggressive music, and it was cool to see myself in someone else when I was told that was a white only space. And then we got the Statue of Liberty with the Puerto Rican flag. That's like a artist rendering of when the Young Lords took over the Statue of Liberty in protest. We got a drum. Actually, my sister got me from Colombia when she was over there. That's handmade from somebody over there. And then Keyshawn Johnson, Super Bowl from the Buccaneers. I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan.
Wow, that's a good altar.
Yeah, a lot going on here.
That is really good.
I appreciate you asking.
There's this amazing, I think it's like a meme or whatever, a video like, and some guy was like, I thought I got my little brother. Have you seen this? A Captain America.
It
was the Puerto Rican flag. He thought he got him bed sheets of Captain America, and it was the Puerto Rican flag. I love that so much. Yeah. It brought me so much joy.
I absolutely love that. But bro, I mean, listen, it's been great getting to kind of pick your brain. I think beyond just trying to provide a cool conversation for the audience, I feel like I took away a lot from it, which is always, I think, the ultimate goal of these kinds of things, is to have that connection and really just be able to share ideas with people that I think are like-minded or that can teach something to not only the audience but myself. So I first and foremost want to say thank you, man, for the conversation.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. This was nice. I feel like we could do it a whole other hour, whole other day.
Absolutely. But listen, man, I know you got a bunch of shit going on. I mean, what do you want to push people to? Where can they check out all that you're working on? Obviously, Brown Enough.
Yeah,
is
buy the book.
And
buy Brown Enough. Buy the book. Everywhere you get books. It's in all the places. I did the audiobook. I'm trying to get a Grammy for that thing. I'm proud of it. Like, I recorded it. It's beautiful. Listen to Rubirosa. It's a very special podcast. And after Rubirosa finishes next week, it turns into the Brown Enough podcast. So it'll turn into a weekly show called Brown Enough, where we put incredible sort of brown people on blast.
Love it.
And that's what we got going on. Yeah, Instagram, Christopher_Rivas, ChristopherRivas.com. Yeah, it's all there. And I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful for your community and just everything you're building,
Man, big shout out to my guest, Chris Rivas, for hopping on today's show. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation and connecting with Chris. And I felt like I resonated with so many things that he was speaking of, so many of the experiences that he expressed. And man, his vulnerability is something to be modeled after, I guess I could say. I want to kind of touch on that a bit. So let's kind of tie everything we talked about today with Chris in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew. But first, let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
Time for Conclusion Stew.
Man, there are so many things in Chris's story and that conversation that as I was just talking to him, I wanted to just keep, diving deeper. And I would have loved to, have sat there for a few hours just picking Chris's brain, It was one of those conversations. And I think he's just one of those people who has done so much of that self-work and that healing work that it's great to talk to those people and to kind of, discuss their journey and pick their brain and see how you can apply different things that they've learned to your own life, right? And I think one of the things that I want to harp on that we talked about in our conversation was Chris saying, his sort of him placing a lot of value on asking questions, right? And I think in a crazy world where everybody's fighting to be right, and in a world where we oftentimes lack individual self-awareness, the ability to just stop and come at any sort of argument or idea or worry, come at it from a place of just asking a question and being open to whatever comes your way, diving deeper or picking someone's brain, whatever the case may be. I think that's a really great thing that I took away from our conversation. And I think the other thing that I think just kind of resonates and continues to build upon many of the things that I talk about here on this podcast, the idea that authenticity is in fact your superpower, right? And Chris, for a while kind of steered away from his true authentic self, right? And he did what he had to do to find success and it got him some of that success, but internally he was still sort of struggling for fulfillment, and when he began to write, vulnerable articles like the one where he talked about why he only dated white women and man, being so vulnerable to talk about having, cosmetic surgery to appear more Anglo, to get more bookings. Like all of these are really difficult conversations for anybody to admit on a personal one-on-one level with somebody that they're close to, let alone with the entire world and social media and the judgment that comes from all of that. But I think it's why someone like Chris is making the impact that he is. It's why he has a book, it's why he's hosting successful podcasts, and why he is such an important member for our community because of the work that he's being unafraid to do and the voice that he's using to speak on behalf of all of us, right? So I just want to talk about that because that's the big thing I took away and what I was in awe of when talking to Chris and seeing how candid he was and him sort of reliving some of these experiences that he really put himself out there. I was just in awe of seeing somebody's authenticity and being unafraid to be vulnerable. I was in awe of seeing that at work and hearing his story. And man, big shout out to Chris for hopping on today's show. I really appreciate it. That was a really dope conversation. I hope y'all took away something from it. I know I definitely did. And with that said, man, season 2, we are here. Episode 1 in the books. Thank y'all so much who have stuck with me on this journey as we grow, evolve, and learn together, man. And it's so good to be back. And I love y'all as usual at DJ Dramos on social media platforms. DM me. Let me know what you think. Give me your thoughts, your ideas. You know, those who have done it, you know that I've done my best to respond to you and to hear your concerns or your questions, you know, or to address things that you feel like I missed. You know, that's what I love to be able to do, is have this open dialogue. I want to reiterate that this is in fact a community. This isn't a show about me or to pat myself on the back or to, you know, to brighten my star, if you will. This is about building a community of people who want to grow and who want to celebrate our culture and do it in a way that helps us evolve and brings out the best in us, right? So again, at DJ Dramos, hit me up on those socials. Let me know what you think, any ideas, whatever. I always appreciate that. And man, if you're a new listener, please give us a rating, a review wherever you listen to the podcast. All of that stuff really does help out. It takes you 2 seconds, but it makes a huge impact on helping our show grow. So man, thank y'all so much. And I'll catch y'all on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. Until then, stay safe. I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.